Welcome to the third annual Festival of Learning. It's a great pleasure to kick off this celebration of teaching and learning innovation. Great to see so many people here today. Clearly, our community is energized about the transformation and the experiments and the innovations that are happening in the education space. So over the course of the day today, we will all have an opportunity to hear from innovators who are on the front lines, people who are reimagining education, people who are amplifying all of our impacts, both from here at MIT and from around the world. So I want to thank the Office of the Vice Chancellor, especially Ian Waits himself, but also Michael Rudder and Elizabeth Hoy for co-sponsoring this event with the Office of Open Learning and with the Office of Digital Learning, which I lead. I want to thank everyone from the Office of Digital Learning who contributed, especially Cheryl Barnes, who is sitting right there, who leads our digital learning and residential education group. For Molly Ruggles, is Molly here also? Molly's just outside. Gillian Walsh, I think also just outside the room. So thank you to all of them, and thank you to all of our presenters, including Tabitha, Fox, and Aaron, who will be panelists in the second half of the morning, and the dozens of people from across MIT who will be exhibiting and discussing their projects at the Learning Expo. So now, without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Po-Shen Loh. Po is a social entrepreneur working across the full spectrum of mathematics and education all around the world. He is the founder of the free personalized learning platform Expii.com, which is an educational technology startup social enterprise which algorithmically curates openly licensed math and science lessons and problems contributed by the world, giving learners videos that bring math to life, creative math problems, and personalized learning. He did his PhD in Princeton, and I had to decide whether to out the fact that he was an undergrad at Caltech, and I just did. We forgive him for that. He did his PhD in Princeton after doing an undergrad degree at Caltech. He's now a math professor at Carnegie Mellon University, where his math research is in combinatorics, probability, and algorithms. He is also the national coach of the USA International Mathematical Olympiad team. And under his coaching, the team won the international competition in 2015, 2016, and 2018, which is remarkable. And to give you a sense of how remarkable it is, before 2015, the last time the US won was 1994. Po's research and educational outreach take him to cities across the world, reaching an annual in-person audience of nearly 10,000 people. I guess we're adding about 500 to his tally for this year. And he's featured in or co-created videos totaling over 4 million YouTube views. So it's a pleasure to introduce Po-Shen Loh. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, MIT. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to interact with you. And to all of our people who are viewing online, hello and welcome. To all the people who are not here and who are not viewing online, we care about you. Actually, you're the most important group. Okay. Well, I'll talk about all of these groups as I talk through this opening talk today. In some sense, it's a real pleasure to be here in such a diverse event. Before the event, I went around to learn why different people came here, and I heard all sorts of different answers, which makes me very happy because this talk is going to have all sorts of different parts. But I have to open with one part because I'm a teacher, and as a teacher, I have to teach something. I'm also a researcher. As a researcher, I want to show you something original, something that I came up with. And I'm also a mathematician. So as a mathematician, I want to show you something about math. And I don't want this to be the entire talk. But that's OK. This is a die. Do you see this 1? I wonder if MIT students know what's on the opposite side. How in the world do you know it's a 6? You can't see through that. Actually, you can. But OK, how did you know it was a 6? You looked at it before. And this person says? The opposite sides add up to 7 is his technical way of explaining how a die is laid out. Wonderful, we all know that. Does anyone know why? Actually, that's a really interesting question. If you go online and Google for why, the best answers you find are because that's how it is, because it's more fair. I don't know. It's how it's always been. What's that? Because it balances better. We're at MIT. So here we have it. Somebody has a physics explanation. Because in a die, as you know, the dots are usually holes, right? And so obviously, you would like to have the center of mass to be as close to the center of the die as possible, to be balanced, as we know. And so which is the heaviest face? 1. Yes, that was a trick question. 1 is the heaviest face. There's one hole. And so you'd want to balance the 1 against the second heaviest face, which is the 2. Actually, that's kind of funny. That was the first thing I thought about, too. That's too bad. Actually, what that shows, by the way, is that all the dice are wrong. Well, I am a social entrepreneur. I didn't start a company to go and make new dice to go and distribute to the world. Because actually, it turns out there's another reason. Does anyone know? And it doesn't have to do with physics. It has to do with three-dimensional geometry. About interesting things you can do with a die if the opposite sides did not add up to 7. I like this. We're at MIT, and I've asked a question, and people are still thinking. Is there a way to cheat? That's the right. I mean, obviously, there is a way to cheat. If the dice had opposite sides not adding up to 7, there would be a way to cheat. And it has to do with how you roll the die. Let's suppose you wanted a big number. How do you roll a die? I don't know. You do this, right? That's one way. Are there any other ways to roll a die? It's a three-dimensional cube. It doesn't have to randomly roll or hit the floor. There are other things you can do with it. Yeah? You can roll it along one axis like a wheel. And so you would like that if you rolled it along one axis like a wheel, the 4 numbers that you get would have a good average. If you're rolling a die along 4 numbers like a wheel, and this is the axis, what would you like for the average of those 4 numbers to be? Not 4.5. You want it to be the same as the average of somebody doing this, right? So you want it to be the same as 3.5. Oh, you want to cheat. Oh, I see. So you're already thinking about how to make a better die. That's a separate topic. But you want the average to be 3.5, right? If you want the average to be 3.5 of 4 faces, well then, what does the sum of those 4 faces have to be? 14. 4 times 3.5. So at that point, how do you know that the axial faces add up to 7? Well, that's true. Same for all 3 axes. That's one way to do it. Another way to think of this is what is the sum of all of the faces in the first place? The sum of all 6 faces in the first place should be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, which is 21, minus what we've already accounted for, 14, which is 7. OK, so that's actually why you need to have all the opposite pairs add up to 7, or else you would have a way to cheat. OK. That was theoretical. Is theoretical useful? Well, just a second. Let me show you something practical, too. And at this point, I want to make one warning to everyone. Please do not use anything you learned today to cheat other people. OK? And you'll see how this all ties together in the talk I'm giving. I want to talk about a practical game that involves 2 dice. It's called Monopoly. Has anyone ever played Monopoly? Yeah, people have played Monopoly. I've played Monopoly, too. Does anyone know any particularly great strategies in Monopoly? Not to play, says somebody. That's if you want to save more time in your life. That's true. But maybe, yeah, back there. buy cheap houses, buy a lot of property, right? Buy a whole lot of land as fast as you can. Actually, this strategy also works in real life. But, as we're talking about Monopoly, right? Sometimes when you're playing this game, I'm just wondering if anyone has ever had this experience before while playing Monopoly, of saying, I'm here, that's go to jail. 1, 2, 3, oh my gosh, I sure hope I don't get some number. Has anyone experienced this in their life? Yes. Tell me a number, and I will not get that sum. 7. Yeah, you want my life to be hard. I will not get a sum of 7. I have a 3 so far. 7 minus 3 is 4. See the 4? I think you can still see the 4. I didn't get 7. When I realized this, I was like, how did I realize this like 30 years too late? And how does no one else in the world know what this is? Actually, by the way, that's the power of mathematics. That's the power of innovation. When you come up with some new idea, you have the power to decide what to do with it. And I guess what we are here is, I guess I'm a white hat hacker. Hi, everyone. This is how you do this. Now, please don't use it. Right. And so, oftentimes people ask, like, in math class, like, when are we ever going to use this? This is a math class where I'm telling you you're not allowed to use it because it's too powerful. It's just too powerful, okay? And in any case, you have to actually we have to use our skills for good. I mean, that's the other subtext of all of this. In some sense, here we are at one of the top institutions for higher learning, and we certainly hope that all of our students who are graduating from these kinds of campuses will use all of their skills for good. We'll get to that too. Great. So I use this as the intro to my talk because it actually wraps a whole lot of things together. This is a conference about education, about learning. As a practitioner of teaching, I think very much about all of these topics. And I think the first thing I wanted to show you is in this particular lesson that we used, we actually haven't used technology yet. That was actually intentional that I did it this way. In fact, we didn't even use slides. There's only one slide in this presentation, actually. I'm not kidding. There's only one slide, so we didn't use slides. We're OK. Right? And instead, we used the chalkboard. But what did we actually do? We were very heavy on the interaction. That's also why my first line to everyone here was, it's a pleasure to be able to interact with you today. I think that if we are in a place as an educator, and we are in the place, we should be leveraging the one thing we're able to do with everyone in the place, which is to dynamically interact with everyone in the room. Of course, we also acknowledge all the people watching. It's a pleasure to be able to reach all of you as well. But, there goes my slide. But at the same time, we hope that maybe you are able to participate in some sense with all of the discussion that was going on by thinking alongside, to be an active learner at the same time. I think a lot about this because actually at Carnegie Mellon University, I also am quite used to teaching in classrooms where there might be 100 seats. And what is the role of the professor or the teacher in this new environment? Actually, when I think about this, I also think about how lucky all of you students are. When I was going to high school and college, it was not so easy to just get any piece of information that I wanted to from the internet. Actually, when I went to college, I'm in that particular generation where there were computers, but they were in a computer lab. And you would go to the computer lab to go and use the computers. And so you're living in this information age where you can get just about anything. At that point, as an educator in person, my feeling is I really have only one job, which is to convince you after this to go and look all sorts of stuff up and use your time to follow your interests. In fact, my role is not really to convey information. It's to be the cheerleader, to be the coach. This actually reminds me of a line that I'm going to borrow from one of your PhD students. He was giving this talk at the National Museum of Mathematics. He's a mathematics PhD student, brilliant mathematician, who just happens to be so good at football that he also used to play professional for the NFL team, Baltimore Ravens. This is John Urschel. So he was giving this talk, and he commented about how when he was training for athletics, there would be so many coaches who would encourage you, who would say, one more set, you can do this. You can actually run this 1 second faster. That's what we also do. That's what our job is as math coaches, science coaches, or teachers or professors. So I guess the first part of this is let's go really heavy on trying to think about how we interact. And in fact, every time we think about what we do with education at Carnegie Mellon University, we're actually always thinking of skewing further and further towards having more interaction between the professors and the students, simply because all of the resources are out there. Great. But this sounds nice, but there's a little bit of a problem. Because we already know it's not optimal for me just to face 100 people and talk at 100 people. The one teacher to 100 student ratio is not necessarily optimal. What is optimal? 1 to 3. 1 to 1. I'm going to say no. It's 1 to half. We can use non-integers here. It's 1 to half. So what I mean by that is, of course, half was just a metaphor. It's really ideal to have more teachers to every student. In some sense, all of these are artificial. All these like 1 teacher to 100 students, 1 teacher to 1 student. These are not what is optimal. These are what are put on as limitations because of economics and cost, right? So the main issue is not necessarily that we should do these things. It's just that those are the only things we can afford to do. And so that becomes very interesting, especially when we are working on ways to reach more people. And is the world a fair place? Unfortunately not. It's not a fair place, but we can see what we can do to try to make it more fair. And once you realize that the best thing to do is to actually have many different sources of information and education and motivation for every student, and the only limitation is cost, you start to think, are there any ways to circumvent this cost? This is something I started thinking about when I became the national coach of the US International Math Olympiad team about, subtraction is hard, about 5-6 years ago. Right, so I became the coach, and I started to think, what should I do with this? I mean, I could try to make the team win, but actually I didn't want to. Not that I didn't want to, it's fine, it's nice to win, but that wasn't the goal. In fact, actually, when I was talking with the Mathematical Association of America, which is the nonprofit organization with a century of history that organizes all of this in the US, and they were selecting me as coach, I said, you have to be careful. If you put me as the coach, we're probably going to do a lot worse because I'm not going to care about how we're doing on the competition at all. Instead, I want to work on building up talent. I want to work on helping any student that we touch in these math Olympiads to be as successful as possible in 20 years. And I want to think about what we can do for the rest of the world. Fortunately, this nonprofit organization is not only focused on winning math Olympiads, and they thought this was a great idea. So we went ahead and did it, and then we accidentally won 3 times. But that was an accident and a big testament to the great skill of many of the team members. Actually, many of those team members are actually here at MIT. I think they're asleep right now, but in any case, they deserve it. So in any case, as I was thinking about all of this, I said there's only one problem if I want to do something to try to help with education throughout the country. And the problem is that I have no money, and I have no major political power or connections or influence. So what could you possibly do? Fortunately, there is something that has changed. And it's something that is it's a huge empowerment to all of the young people here today, which is that one person today has an absolutely enormous amount of power if you leverage technology. So technology will indeed come into my talk for anyone here who was hoping to hear about education technology. And the way I see technology coming in is actually through a certain mathematical observation. Everything boils down to first principles. And the mathematical observation is, today, everyone has access to devices that can do mathematical calculations as fast as all of the people in the world working at the same time, even if you have no internet connection. I'm referring to the fact that just about every electronic computation device today, including your smartphone, including your smartwatch, has a processor in it whose speed of calculation is on the order of magnitude of 1 gigahertz. And giga means billion. Hertz means per second, cycles calculations per second. We have access to these devices. These are really cheap. And the good news is that the world's population in SI units is 7 giga people. It's the same giga, right? So the point is that everyone has access to, everyone meaning any student in their dorm room, if they so desire, has the ability to project influence, project their way of learning, project their way of letting people interact with learning, scaling through these extremely inexpensive microchips. Nowadays, you don't even need physical microchips. You can just put it all on the cloud, which is actually what we do as well. So then the thought process became, is there a way to leverage the fact that there is this kind of computation so that even if you don't have that much in terms of resources, anyone could learn? At that point, one takes everything back to first principles again. How should they learn? What are we supposed to do anyway when we're trying to teach? As somebody who teaches not only university students, but also I also enjoy going all around the world. I particularly enjoy audiences which may be not so already in tune, already inclined to want to listen to me. I think that's a very interesting challenge. As you go around, I've come to realize that actually half the battle is convincing you to pay attention and not be on your smartphone. Today we seem to be doing okay. But actually, this is something that in a broader context, if there are no smartphones, for example, in many high schools, there are no smartphones allowed in class, the analogy here is to actually capture people's attention. So then the inspiration becomes, gee, what do high school students spend most of their time on these days? There's actually one particular internet property, internet website, that occupies the time of American teenagers. Does anyone know one of these that, maybe you'll guess the one I'm thinking about, but one of these that really occupies vast amounts of time of American teenagers? Instagram is one guess, Fortnite is one guess. These are actually also true. There's no real right or wrong answer. It's hard to measure. But I think there's another one yeah, it's YouTube. So in some sense, any of us who grew up in a generation before YouTube know that many people watch TV for hours a day. That's YouTube, right? But then why are people watching YouTube today instead of TV? On demand. On what kind of demand? On their interest. Actually, the reason YouTube is so good is because it recognizes that not every single person likes to watch one style. I mean, I will say certain styles are very, very entertaining. I fully respect that. But there are other styles which are apparently extraordinarily entertaining to people, like Baby Shark. If you haven't heard of Baby Shark, you should talk to your teenage son or daughter, and you might learn a little bit more about Baby Shark. But I'm simply saying that we live in a generation where, in some sense, we've already found the secret to engagement, and that might be choice. Actually, all of this stuff that I decided to then work on to try to scale the efforts to a broader population were in some sense inspired by a lot of earlier work that people had done with open learning initiatives. Actually, certainly here at MIT, the online courseware was something that I saw when I was in high school as well. And OpenCourseware, OCW is how I called it. I never quite thought about what the O stood for. But that just shows that that was something that was very central to our psyche at the time. But these I thought were excellent things. Actually, when I started my work with Expii, I was inspired by the fact that many people had created these online modules, these different ways for anyone in the world to completely for free see interesting ways to learn. And then I wanted to build on the shoulders of giants, or stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, and maybe think a little bit about what a high school student does. And of course, I recognize that a lot of the work that's been done often at higher education is to help provide higher education to more audiences. But if we want to think about K to 12, does anyone know how a high school student does their homework? If they go to their textbook, of course, right? If they don't know how to do something, they go to the textbook, right? No. What do? They go online. So they Google it. right? Actually, this is my only way to project a mobile phone. I'm using Google Dev Tools. Please pardon the mess on the right side. This is not my fault. This is the way that we use it on the Google browser. But I'm doing this on purpose. This is a mobile phone. This is actually the generation that we live in today. In fact, by operating this website, we also know what kind of traffic comes in. 50% mobile phone. And so whenever we think about what we're doing with education technology, and especially if you want to reach parts outside the United States, your browser should look like this. OK, Google it. And why do they Google it? They Google it because they want to find a bunch of different ways of explaining things. You can see what I was Googling lately. So suppose you're doing your homework. Why do you search Google? You search Google because you expect that you'll get a bunch of different results, and you'll be able to compare between them, and that's your choice. In fact, that's the reason they're going to Google instead of going to any one particular website. They're also hoping that Google's going to tell them maybe all they need to know in the immediate blurb, which is kind of nice. This is actually what the behavior is of the typical high school student, not only in the United States, but in the world. And so their hope is that by going to this, they'll be able to find lots of different ways to explain it. Maybe if you look at these search results, come on, we can scroll, right? Let's scroll. You could read from like this particular page, which is a math website, other math websites, and so on. And so we recognize that people actually wanted to have this power of choice. It'd be a little bit easier, though, if all of the choice was at the same place, which is why you should click on the first search result. Great. So this is actually what we decided to build. This is called Expii. It's completely free. And this is designed in a way so that everyone in the world could pool their resources, and then we could use these very inexpensive computers to broadcast them to all people in the world, but in a way where you sort of have created the YouTube style of a learning website. And what does YouTube have? YouTube has more videos than you can shake a finger at, because there should be choice. And YouTube uses an algorithm called voting to gather information. Not an algorithm. It uses a signal from voting to gather information about what kinds of things people want. Once you have data, once you have information, if you use the computer science, if you use the mathematics and the algorithms, you can work magic with that. The key is what's the basic data that you need. And the basic data that you need is how much does each person like each explanation. From there, you can do very sophisticated things. So actually, this is what we do. This is Expii. And if you can see, there are 4 explanations. This one is here. Actually, that one was written by a student. But I'm just showing what these things look like. And in some sense, this should feel like an optimized version of a search for an educational content, where we have decided that we're going to make this bookmark, in some sense, for equation of a sphere, and put all of these different ways that the world can learn one thing in one place. And of course, the key is the word we is supposed to represent we, the entire world. Because I guess I was of the opinion that no one particular person or no one particular organization could ever hope to be the world's absolute best way of explaining everything to everybody. The world still needs to have people who come up with Baby Shark. And that's going to work for some people, and it's not going to work for other people. You know those cat videos? You could learn calculus all through cats. Why not? Why not? So my opinion is, this is a playground that can be opened. And so what we set out to do was to open this playground and just make it possible for anyone to contribute. Actually, the website is built in such a way that anyone in the world can contribute, just like how you can post a video on YouTube, and then anyone else in the world can choose which ones they like, and also they can then interact with them. This project that I started actually only exists because of some very, very passionate students who were with me at the very beginning. And I'm saying this because we're, again, in a university environment here. This is MIT. And I'm just saying this because, in some sense, some of the new things that are built are not necessarily just from a commercial entity which decides that here's something that's worth selling. Sometimes what happens is that people who are actually involved in teaching and learning, and students who are deeply passionate about helping others like them learn, and remember what it was like to learn, band together. Actually, a number of the people who were helping me build this at the very, very beginning were students who were at Carnegie Mellon University and at MIT. This was built by a distributed group at the very beginning. Nowadays, we actually are tightening everything up into a team that's all in the same place so we can move a little bit more efficiently. But nevertheless, I want to say this as a gesture to the students, to say, you really can do anything. The ability to use these computers to pop out a website that costs you not very much. You can reach lots and lots of people. Actually, after doing this, we said, if you have something that people can already go to learn on, you can actually start to even build in ways for them to, just a second, you can build in ways for them to learn through doing. And this is coming back to this whole idea before. Oh, just a second, I don't want that. Actually, let me pop up to the desktop version. That would be a little bit easier for everyone to watch, right? We can pull it back to this original point I made about how the best way to learn was interactive. We need more interaction. And when I think about this, I often think about how, even when I teach, some of the things I say are boilerplate, in the sense that I have certain stories that I'll tell, I have certain things I'll say to explain, and how I choose between which segment to plug in is the interactive piece. So in some sense, the architecture of an online learning website should be that you have blobs, and every blob is bite-sized like the kind of thing I'll tell you in a short spiel, connected together with an algorithm that will route you from blob to blob. Well, if you already are starting to build all of the blobs, and by the way, all of this is openly licensed Creative Commons. Once you have this huge pool of Creative Commons content, then you can start to do things like let people learn simply by doing. Oh boy. Anyone want to do this? Actually, this is not so bad. A times B has to be 24, right? So, oh no, they're all 24. Darn it. Okay. Now we actually have to work. Hey, does anyone here in the audience already have it? This is how I teach my class, by the way. If I don't know the answer, I just go and ask the students. This is the beauty of teaching in a place where everyone is thinking. Anyone want to do it? What? A equals 6, B equals 4. Thank you. Just making sure you're all awake. Bam. And at that point, you can have questions. The questions can start to learn more about you. You can crowdsource all the solutions that you wish. But then you can start to build algorithms. You can build algorithms that say, suppose you got that question right. What should you do next? And what you'll see here is that and we're not going to do this one, but as you are doing questions, you can actually start to build in a logic that starts to walk you from topic to topic, but let's pretend I don't know how to do this. What would I wish my tutor or teacher would do if I said I don't know how to do this? I wish they would teach me something. So here are 9 explanations of combining like terms. This is all drawing from the same pool of openly licensed content to say which one do you like. Actually, this apparently is the top explanation, and it's a YouTube video. Here's the next best. Is it any good? Let's find out. Oh, wow. Yes, actually, this one's even written in a way which is interactive. As you can see, I'm saying, oh, wow, because I don't actually know what people have put into this website. That's the beauty of opening something up for the whole world to be able to participate and use voting. What's 1 plus 2? I know that. That's 3. I don't need to ask you guys. Yeah, of course. And as you can see, it's walking me through. Actually, this particular lesson is encoding a walkthrough lesson, which is not random questions. Okay, but why did I talk through this? Because this particular arc is maybe what one can try to do if you're trying to automate teaching, which would be that you route people through, and whenever they don't know something, maybe that's a good time to teach. Actually, that also reminds me of how I learned from my PhD advisor. We have graduate students here in this room, so some of you can also relate to this, that when you're learning in your PhD, it's usually not that your PhD advisor will sit you down for a lecture to teach you everything. Rather, it's that, hey, why don't you try to do this? And you do it, and you get stuck. And then you go ask for help, and the help comes. And sometimes your advisor, she or he has to tell you a few times the same thing. But not that many times. This is actually how we really learn. If you think about how we often do it in the classroom, it's flipped around. We'll often say, hey, this is how you do it. Go practice it until I don't have to tell you again. And this is not an attack on teachers. This is simply just the fact that those are our limitations when we have these 1 on 30 environments. This is not a teacher's fault. And in fact, teachers are masters at dealing with this situation and also continuing to help provide that differentiation and that personalization. But so our thought was, Let's just throw it all on the internet and make it free. And that's actually what we're doing with Expii right now. Which then gets to the last part of this talk, which is, great, all of these wonderful resources online for free. edX, Expii, Wikipedia. We've actually moved into an age where anyone who decides that they really want to learn can learn. That's going to open a divide. Because I just said the first part is, you decide you're going to buy in. You decide you want to go and play. You decide you want to go and learn. And some people make that decision. Other people have parents or live in a societal context where their pressure is to do this. This is actually opening a massive divide. For example, when I went to school, it used to be that you'd go home for the summer. I went to school in the United States. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. And you would go to school, go home in the summer, and you'd usually forget a lot of stuff. The technical term is called the summer slide, actually, if you work in this area. Great. And that was normal. Today, that's not what's going on. Today, you have people who leave at the end of the school year. Some of them have the summer slide. What about the others? Well, I just broke into two categories. The others decided to go online and pre-learn the next year's stuff. So you suddenly got a slide combined with a jump. And if this starts to integrate, if this starts to aggregate year after year after year, you finally see the result, which is that there are some people who graduate high school knowing things that I learned in my PhD. This is normal now. And at the same time, you have people who didn't do that. This is where I think that all of us, in this room especially, because you're already in this talk, have a responsibility to try to help promote this idea that learning is something that really is great for everyone, to everyone. Because otherwise, all we're going to do is exacerbate an enormous gap. And if learning was not important, who would care about this gap? This wouldn't be an important gap. But we live in a century where your intellectual work is becoming the critical work that you do. A few centuries ago, you could show up on the shores of the United States of America with a lot of willpower and willingness to use your body and your physical power and your agility to do work, and you could make a living. And you could raise an entire generation. We have people a few doors down building robots to do all of that. I'm not referring only to MIT. I'm referring to industry. I'm referring to governments. I'm referring to research that's going on all over the world. Artificial intelligence labs. Well, there are some excellent artificial intelligence labs which are doing all of these things that will make it so that if you aren't able to be as flexible and agile with your way of thinking, you'll have trouble. So this is where I think that this last part of the work that we do is particularly important. And this is the outreach part. How does one actually go and reach out? The way I gave this talk, I hope you saw that one of the goals here was to always put yourself in the shoes of the student. And that's actually how a lot of the observations and insights we had actually came from hanging out with students, asking them, what do you watch on YouTube? Finding out how people do homework. Actually, I learned all of this by working with designers. I am a mathematician. At the beginning, I thought you could do everything straight from first principles and nice mathematical logic. Yeah, that's true, but humans are humans, right? And it's actually really helpful to do user research. And as you do all of this, then you start to be able to build out product. And things that we also learned were maybe, how does one even try to reach out to help people think that mathematics is interesting? For this, I got inspired by something very not mathematical, but by advertising on TV and thinking about how Coca-Cola convinces you to drink Coke. Have you ever heard a Coca-Cola commercial that says how much more nutrition you will get by drinking that Coke and how you will live longer in this century? No. Actually, the nutritional value is arguable. But what they show you is a person that you would aspire to be like. And then I don't have this, but somebody would run in from off screen who's someone you aspire to get a hug from and give you a hug, right? But this is actually how one promotes a way of thinking. And so what we thought is, maybe we can try to learn from all these things we've been doing. We've been inspired by YouTube. We've been thinking about ways to really drive that interest. Can we try to make videos, because that's how people are interacting, that maybe try to show mathematics in a way where even these undercurrents, these emotional undercurrents, are positive. And how do you do that? Again, the way to do that is to go and find teenagers and work with them. So we did. And here, I'm happy to show you, towards the end of my talk, a 2-minute video that was produced in collaboration with a team of teenagers. 2 minutes. Play.
Dude, that's the bus? I know he's not gonna make it. The bus is moving way too fast for us to catch it. But I know the alleyway is the perfect shortcut. And since the street and the alleyway create a right triangle, I can use the Pythagorean theorem to beat the bus. I know there are 4 spaces between the telephone poles on the street the bus is currently on. And the street the bus and I were just on has 3 spaces. So, A would be 3, B is 4, and in the Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And if I add them together, it makes 25. And the square root of 25 is 5.
All right, how did you get here so fast?
Pythagorean theorem, man.
I gotta learn that.
Oh my gosh, you're getting into our YouTube playlist. Actually, hang on a second, let me stop. Okay. Oh yeah, as you can see, we're learning about all sorts of things too. Right, great. But so, I wanted to close with that because in some sense, we should take ourselves out of what we're used to. Sometimes the way to do that is to talk to students from all different backgrounds. Find out what motivates them. Because what's our job? Our job is to help them. Our job is to help everyone decide in their heart that they want to learn, and then we provide them with all of these ways that they can. This is our responsibility, and thank you all for joining me today.
So we have some time for questions for Po. There are 2 microphones in the 2 aisles, one here and one there. Please come to the mic if you'd like to ask a question. And I'm going to try to pick students, if there are students with questions.
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
In fact, the question and answer is the best part. Actually, whenever I start my class at CMU, the first lecture I usually tell people, if you're not going to ask questions, you might as well just watch me on YouTube.
Here we are on this side. It should be.
Okay, thanks for the talk, very nice talk. And I have a question about the learning. So you talk about the gap between 2 group of people who learned in the summer who didn't. So do you think that gap is what we would like to promote or not? I mean, if we want the people to learn during summer, if there will be too much pressure for the students?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. So this is actually a problem in the sense that if somebody feels like they have to start running and everyone starts running, then maybe you have a problem. I would say that in some sense, the reason for those problems, in my observations from running around the world and seeing how different education systems work, is that if there is a high-stakes test that determines a very important part of your life, then you start to get this issue where people start to try to outdo each other on this one test, on this one dimension. Actually, what I'm getting at here as a mathematician is that a human ability is multidimensional. And in some sense, we want to celebrate that. We don't need every single person in the world to optimize in the same way. We want many dimensions. If there are sufficiently many dimensions, from it be mathematical, creativity with verbal communication, I'm just coming up with many different directions, right? Like even design. If there are all of these different dimensions that you can individually excel in, then it would not be as big of a problem because you don't have this huge race. You see, a lot of the time when you see this high-pressure preparation in the summer, it's because you feel like there's this test that's coming, and if you don't prepare for example, this test to determine what middle school you'll get into, I'm naming a particular test, right? Then you see all of these elementary school students doing exactly what you said. So honestly, what I think the answer is that learning is fun. I spend all my time learning too. I spend my free time learning because it's fun. It's actually not stressful. You learn new skills, it feels so good. The only time it doesn't feel good is when you say, oh, if I fail, my life is not going to be so good because there's this test that has determined me. So I would actually encourage everyone to think that learning in their spare time is fun. I'll actually share a little bit of tidbits of what I do. I'm actually still learning. These days, in the evenings, I take two kinds of classes. One class is Chinese, because actually nowadays my interactions go across to China every 2 months to build all around the world. The other class I take is improvisational comedy. I wasn't like super, like, in high school, you can ask anyone who knew me in high school. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that every single skill in the world can be learned. And if you make it so that the learning is the fun thing you do when you have nothing else to do, you'll be a pretty interesting person. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just now you talked about a lot of the online courses and online learning opportunities. But from our experience, for example, the MOOC, in the beginning, there are a lot of students sign up. And if you do a survival analysis in the end, like the number just decrease a lot. So I was wondering, how do you think of this? And how do you think we should improve this situation?
The MOOC, in my opinion, was a great contribution to society. That's the first thing I'm going to say. So a lot of respect to the people who were the pioneers in doing this. Now, you're talking about something which one discovered after the fact, as we found out that maybe people weren't sticking through the classes. One thing I will say is, whether they stuck through the classes or not, they may have gotten something from it. But second of all, the other piece that we learned from, and why we built Expii in this way, is actually that a lot of people these days are not necessarily looking to get an entire course in one shot from beginning to end, because you can't possibly design a course to actually match everyone's background. It's just not possible. And that's actually why Expii was built in a way where your landing point is, what is that student doing? That student needs this. Okay, deliver this to them in the way that they absolutely prefer. If they're still confused, show them what's around this, and they'll find their way. And this is actually how maybe we learn now. All of the MOOCs that have been created could actually adapt to this situation. In fact, I believe Coursera is trying to do something like this nowadays too. And in some sense, the question is just, what do you do with all of this content? Maybe the sequence. The sequence might not be exactly right, but no one expects everything to be right the first time you do it. And you can then resequence. So my opinion is engagement's important. Actually, certain things that we're doing with ours are we're trying to learn from video games to try to even figure out how you could motivate someone to want to do more problems by researching video games. And this would be, I guess, another dimension you could try. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi there. Can you give us a sense for who is using Expii and how you have changed or grown your audience to match the values you've expressed?
Right. So at the beginning, the people who were using Expii were the ones who we met at math competitions. That was actually many math competitions. Some of them were here at MIT. And so at the beginning, we had some pretty challenging content. Actually, I think there's even a content author sitting in this audience right now. But there was some pretty challenging stuff. And what we started to learn is that if you're trying to reach out to many people, even the way that you write has to be different. So what I always keep is I keep a Google Analytics window open whenever I'm working, just so you can see what's coming through. And you see interesting things. The first thing you see is that almost everyone lands straight from Google. And so actually what we have done to change what we do is to simply make it so that we really deliver what you wanted to get when you're searching on Google. Now, we see people coming from all over the world. I should say our traffic is not anywhere comparable to the traffic of these long existing websites like MIT's OpenCourseWare or edX. We have something like 20,000 25,000 people a month who come through. But they're really just coming through from searching and often landing on these #1 search results on Google. And sometimes we see on the analytics that there are 20 people who suddenly show up from one particular city, all doing the same thing. That's because a teacher has decided to bring their class in to use this as a reference. And also, we have a certain part here where you do problems for practice. It's particularly motivating and particularly inspiring to see when those 20 people are there doing this active problem stream, because basically the teacher is using it to differentiate the education. Yeah.
Hey, so although it took me till grad school to figure out how to self-coach, I've benefited a lot from independent study, but I still see a few limitations, and I'm wondering how we can start to address them. Number one, there's not always ways to self-assess. So recently I wanted to start learning statistics, and I wanted whatever course I did to include principal component analysis, because it's used a great deal in modern molecular biology. Most of the books I found don't have that as a topic, and most of the online courses I found don't have that. There's one OCW course from MIT that does have lectures on PCA, but there are no problems with solutions attached to that course. So that's a little bit of a limitation. Limitation number two, let's say you want to replicate my biology education. You can learn general biology from a site like the one that you just showed us, and then maybe the next course is genetics, and you can probably find a good genetics course with ways to self-assess. Well, after that, maybe you want to learn epigenetics. And I just Googled learn epigenetics online, and there's a bunch of random stuff and a Coursera course you have to pay for. And even then, you'd be maybe losing my genetics professor's insights on the scientific method. So.
Right, thank you.
What can you do?
Actually, I would say some answers to this will come as there are hopefully more of these topic-specific spots where you can find many different ways to understand something. Again, the story you said is you have a goal. Oh, and the practice piece. Actually, I should say the practice piece for us, we think is very important. We just show the Google part because that's what most people use first. You can't learn just by passive, right? So actually, that's why we built in this practice piece. My opinion is I think that everyone in the world who's contributing to these things is doing a great thing. What we try to do is we also try to put forward one more. And so what we're doing is on any topic that we cover, we're loading them with practice questions. And for anyone here who likes the technicalities of how you even find out how much a person knows, we actually apply what's called the ELO rating system to go and find out how much you know about any particular topic. And the ELO rating system is designed in a way that you could actually assess all the way out into the outside tails. This is not just percent correct. This is something that can even identify chess grandmasters. Because basically what you just discussed are two advanced topics. Two, meaning number two, two advanced topics. And what we feel is we first want to help bring in everyone in the basics. But at some point when we have enough people who are using our website, actually we fully intend to open all of those. Yes.
Right. Okay.
One last question from this side.
Thank you.
Thank you for the very inspiring talk. I have a question in your advice and experience. We have a big class here, 700 students, first-year students, all extremely motivated. And we have lots of content. Have you had experience with a university course where we put the content into Expii and then the students start to enhance it and develop it as a forum? So it's not as big an audience as you're talking about, but it's a smaller target group. Thank you.
That's actually something that inspired me to start it in the first place, because I actually knew from my own experience that writing a lesson is the best way to learn it. So actually what I felt is this is just recycling all the effort it takes for someone to properly learn something. If you're trying to learn it, write it yourself, and then you'll know it. The only reason we didn't roll something out at, for example, the MIT undergraduate level is just because of the audience that we were talking about. And that's why we actually started pretty high end, and then we moved all the way down to algebra, pre-algebra, and biology. We would be very interested in doing this sort of thing. Our main question is just about resources, because we're a very small team. And so first, what we seek to do is to grow the stability in what we can do. But then the whole architecture of the platform is designed in such a way that an instructor could give us a map of topics and then open that up for crowdsourcing. And 1 semester later, you would have the entire course archived with maybe 20 different ways of explaining it, and you'd never have to do it again. Yeah.
Thanks. Hopefully we might be able to do that.
Yes, we hope so too.
Thank you very much for an inspirational talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.